Ready for a deep dive? We're tackling one of the oldest stories ever told, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, yeah. We're going way beyond just the surface narrative here.
Right. Exploring themes of storytelling,
Hmm.
mortality, the power of ancient words.
And you know what? We've got a fantastic guide for this journey. Sophus Helle.
Oh yeah, love his work.
His book, Gilgamesh, Story, Death, and Immortality. It brings such a fresh perspective to this ancient text.
Yeah, it really does. One thing that really struck me reading it was how Helle highlights the unusual way this epic has even survived.
Hmm.
We're talking clay tablets. Not exactly the sturdiest material, are they?
You know, it's funny you should say that, because clay actually has incredible durability. I mean, think about it. It can withstand time far better than papyrus or other writing materials.
Oh, that's true.
That's why we have so much cuneiform writing still around today.
Yeah. The ancient script of Mesopotamia.
Exactly, like those tablets they dug up in, was it ancient Iraq?
Yeah.
Exactly. But here's the catch. While durable, clay can also shatter.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
So imagine archaeologists finding this giant jigsaw puzzle of like 500,000 fragments,
Wow.
trying to piece it all together.
Yeah.
That's the reality of reconstructing this epic
That's amazing.
and the ancient culture surrounding it.
Yeah. I mean, that makes those blank spaces in the text even more intriguing, right? It's like we're getting these glimpses into the gaps of history itself.
You know, Helen really leans into that idea.
Does he?
He says those missing pieces, they're not just these frustrating gaps, but they're opportunities for us to engage our own imaginations.
I like that.
We become part of the story that way, filling in the blanks with our own interpretations.
That's a cool way to look at it.
Mhm.
So we've got this epic tale, literally pieced together from fragments. But Helle also kind of questions the really label of epic, right?
Right.
Feels a bit like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
He does. He points out that the term epic is a much later invention, coming from the Greeks, and applying it to this Babylonian text might not fully capture its complexity or its unique qualities.
So how does he categorize it then? I mean, it feels like there's so much packed in there. Action, poetry, philosophy, even what sounds like some early medical beliefs.
It's true, and that's precisely what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
Helle argues that the epic isn't just one genre, it's an anthology.
Oh, wow.
We find hymns, proverbs, prayers, even folk tales, all woven together.
That's amazing.
It's a reflection of the richness and diversity of Babylonian literature itself.
This is already making me want to revisit the epic with fresh eyes. It's like unlocking a hidden treasure chest of different literary forms.
That's exactly the kind of engagement Helle encourages.
I love it.
And it connects to one of his key insights. The climax of the epic isn't some grand battle or heroic feat. It's the stories within the story.
Oh, you mean like those stories within stories, the kind we see in movies sometimes? Which stories is he talking about?
Specifically, Utnapishtim's account of the flood,
Right.
which has some interesting parallels to other ancient flood narratives,
Uh-huh.
and Gilgamesh's own act of writing his life story on those very clay tablets. So meta.
These acts of storytelling, they become their own form of immortality.
So by telling their stories, they're ensuring they live on, even after death.
It is.
That's pretty powerful.
It is. But Helen also points out the cost of that kind of immortality. The storyteller, in a sense, becomes fixed
As a,
as a character within their own narrative.
oh wow.
It's a trade-off. They achieve a kind of timelessness, but at the expense of their dynamic,
Yeah.
living selves.
So they're stuck. Forever a character in their own story?
Yeah.
That's a heavy thought. It's like their stories become their tombs.
A very poetic way to put it.
Thanks.
And that tension, that paradox,
Yeah.
is at the heart of Helle's exploration.
Okay. I'm already hooked. Where does Helle take us next
Oh!
in this deep dive?
We shifts our focus to the political landscape of ancient Mesopotamia,
Okay.
which wasn't a unified empire, but a collection of city-states,
Yep.
each with its own patron god.
And Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
He's the king of Uruk, right? How does that city fit into this whole power dynamic? That's a great question. Helle points out that Gilgamesh's journeys take him to the edges of the known world,
Wow.
but he always returns to Uruk.
He does.
It's like placing Uruk at the very center of their cosmos, a city of immense importance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Uruk wasn't just his home, it was the heart of his world.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting. Helle highlights how the power dynamics between the gods in the epic often mirror the rise and fall of different cities in Mesopotamian history.
All right.
When a city gained prominence, So did their patron god.
So it wasn't just this fixed pantheon of gods. Their power shifted along with the political landscape.
Yeah,
That's a pretty dynamic belief system.
it is. And it shows how deeply intertwined religion and politics were in ancient Mesopotamia.
Yeah, totally.
But let's not forget one of the most iconic elements of the epic, the flood story.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking about that. What's Helle's take on this ancient deluge?
Well, he offers a thought-provoking interpretation. Helle sees the flood myth as an explanation for the Babylonian system of omens and offerings. He suggests that before the flood, communication between gods and humans might have been direct,
Okay.
but afterward, it became more complex.
Wait, are we talking about like how they tried to read signs from the gods? Like reading tea leaves, but way more intense?
You're getting the idea.
Okay.
Helle suggests that the gods began communicating indirectly through these coded messages, dreams, omens, unusual events.
I see.
This created the need for priests and interpreters, people who could decipher the gods' intentions.
So the flood, in a sense,
Yeah.
made talking to the gods a lot more complicated.
It did.
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
It really is, and it shows how deeply this belief system permeated their culture.
Totally.
And it even extended to their understanding of medicine.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. How does the flood connect to medicine?
Well, imagine a world where illness isn't just a random occurrence, but a sign of a god's anger. Physicians, then, had to figure out which god was upset and why, adding another layer of complexity to healing.
This is blowing my mind. We haven't even gotten to Gilgamesh and Enkidu's adventures yet, and I'm already seeing the epic in a whole new light.
And that's just the beginning. Helle's analysis just keeps getting deeper and more thought-provoking as we go.
Okay, my brain is already buzzing with all these insights into the world of the epic, but I'm ready for more. What else does Helle unpack about the way the story is told?
Well, this is where Helle's analysis gets really intriguing. He points out how those 11 tablets we mentioned, those fragments all pieced together. They aren't just random chunks of text.
Right.
They're structured like episodes in a TV series.
Hold on, episodes. I'm picturing Gilgamesh with his own theme music now,
Yeah.
like some ancient Mesopotamian Netflix special.
Huh. I love that image. But seriously, Helle argues that each tablet has its own internal arc, building toward this larger narrative. And get this, they often begin and end at these physical thresholds, doorways, gates, the edges of cities.
So it's like these physical transitions in the story
Yeah.
are mirroring the transitions between the tablets.
Exactly.
That's pretty clever.
And it reinforces this idea of Uruk as the central point, the anchor. Remember, the entire epic is framed by those massive walls surrounding the city.
Oh, right.
Helle is suggesting the structure might have been deliberate, a way to emphasize Uruk's importance for ancient audiences.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how Helle's approach isn't just about deciphering the words. He's looking at the whole picture, the way the story is told, and what that reveals about the culture that created it.
Precisely. And speaking of storytelling, we can't overlook the fact that the epic was likely meant to be performed aloud.
Oh, wow.
Imagine sitting in a dimly lit room, listening to a storyteller weave this tale of gods and heroes.
Okay, now my imagination is really running wild. Was it sung, chanted? Was it one person or a whole chorus? Someone tell me.
I wish we knew for sure. Sadly, no recording booth back then, Helle admits. The exact details are lost to time. But just considering the epic's oral aspects, it adds another layer of richness to it.
Yeah, it makes you realize how different our experience of the epic is today. We're reading a translation, silently, on a page or a screen.
Very different encounter.
It is.
But Helle encourages us to keep those oral roots in mind.
Okay.
Try reading a passage aloud sometime. Hear the rhythm of the language, the power of those ancient words.
You know, now that you mention it, even translated, there's a certain poetry to the language.
Yeah.
It's not your average ancient history textbook.
That's a great point. And it highlights another aspect Helle emphasizes, the epic's dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
He argues that the conversations between characters drive the story forward more than any of the grand actions.
Now that I think about it, you're right. Those long exchanges between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, or Gilgamesh pleading with the gods, those are the moments that really stick with you.
Exactly. And Helle points out that all this dialogue, all this back and forth, it creates a sense of immediacy. It's like we're right there in the room with them, listening in on their hopes and fears and struggles.
It makes the characters feel so much more real, so much more human, even though they're kings and gods and mythical creatures.
Precisely. And it allows for these subtle shifts in perspective, which Helle argues are crucial to understanding the epic's moral complexity.
Oh, interesting.
He points to a great example: the Scorpion woman's reinterpretation of the phrase two-thirds God, one-third human, when she's talking about Gilgamesh.
Oh, yeah, that's such a clever twist. It's usually a way to praise him, right?
It is.
But she uses it to criticize his arrogance and recklessness.
Exactly. And it's through their dialogue, her pointed remark to her husband, that we grasp the full weight of her words. It highlights the power of words to shape meaning, especially in an oral culture.
I'm seeing how every detail Helle points out adds another layer of depth to the epic. It's like he's giving us a whole new set of lenses to see this story through.
And those lenses also help us see the complexities of the epic's characters and their choices. Helle argues that the story isn't about simple moral judgments, about clear-cut right and wrong. It's much more nuanced than that.
So, there are no easy answers, even when it comes to a hero like Gilgamesh.
Right. Helle urges us to question our assumptions about good and evil, hero and monster.
Like that.
He uses Enkidu's seduction by Shamhat as a prime example.
You mean the priestess who tames Enkidu and brings him to Uruk. Isn't that usually seen as a bad thing? Him being lured away from nature?
That's the typical interpretation.
Yeah.
But Helle points out how that one event is viewed differently by different characters, depending on their perspective, and which consequences they choose to emphasize.
So what might seem like a negative event, from one point of view, could actually be positive from another. It's all about who's telling the story.
Exactly. And that ambiguity, that lack of easy answers, is what makes the epic so compelling, even thousands of years later.
Okay, Helle's definitely challenging me to think differently about this ancient text. But I'm ready for the challenge. What other surprises does he have in store?
Well, speaking of challenging assumptions, Helle dives deep into the epic's portrayal of nature, which isn't as clear-cut as you might expect.
Okay, isn't usually depicted as this wild, dangerous place, especially in contrast to the civilized world of Uruk.
That's the common assumption.
Right.
But Helle points out that the epic offers a more nuanced view. He highlights the idyllic depiction of Enkidu's early life in nature, living in harmony with the animals.
So it's not just a straightforward nature bad, civilization good kind of thing. There's more going on there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then we have this stark contrast with Enkidu's later role. As a destroyer of the cedar forest, it raises all these questions about the human impact on the natural world and the complexities of our relationship with it.
I'm seeing how Helle's analysis is constantly pushing us to question our expectations, to dig deeper into the layers of meaning embedded in the epic.
It's like he's giving us a mental workout. And speaking of challenging expectations, Helle doesn't shy away from the more unsettling aspects of the epic, like those monstrous figures Gilgamesh encountered.
Oh yeah, like Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest. And that whole terrifying description of him.
Exactly. And Helle's interpretation of these monsters is really thought-provoking.
So,
He argues that they often represent transgressed boundaries, those liminal spaces between different realms of existence.
okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for me a bit more.
Well, think about the scorpion people, who are literally a blend of human and animal, or Humbaba himself, described as part human, part animal, part divine. And then there's the bull of heaven, a celestial being brought down to earth.
I see the pattern. There are all these hybrid creatures existing in these in-between spaces.
Exactly. And Helle suggests that their destruction, while seemingly heroic, actually raises some uncomfortable questions about the human need to impose order on the world.
So even though they're presented as monsters, their deaths aren't necessarily straightforward victories. There are consequences to consider.
Right. It makes you think about the violence inherent in maintaining those boundaries and drawing those lines between us and them, human and nature, civilization and wilderness.
Wow, Helle is taking us to some deep philosophical territory here.
Yeah.
It's making me wonder if there are echoes of these ancient struggles in our own world today.
That's a fantastic observation, and it leads us to one of Helle's most insightful points, which ties back to a phrase that appears throughout the epic, 6 days and 7 nights.
Oh, that rings a bell. But I can't quite place it. Refresh my memory.
It appears at these key moments of transformation. First, with Enkidu's humanization, through his encounter with Shamhat.
Right.
Then Gilgamesh's inhuman quest for immortality, driven by his grief over Enkidu's death.
Right.
And finally, his eventual acceptance of mortality after that week-long sleep.
So each of these weeks represents a kind of boundary crossing, pushing the characters to the very limits of
Yeah.
human experience.
And Helle argues that these cycles of 6 days and 7 nights point to the epic's core theme, the exploration of those very limits, the boundaries of life and death, the human condition itself.
This is definitely more than just an ancient adventure story. Helle's showing us how the epic is grappling with some of the biggest questions humans have ever asked. Questions we're still asking today.
And that's the beauty of it. It's a story that continues to resonate across cultures and centuries.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from fragmented clay tablets to episodes in a TV series talking to the gods, pushing the boundaries of human experience. It's amazing how Helle weaves all these threads together into this coherent and thought-provoking analysis. But I'm ready for the grand finale. What's Helle's ultimate takeaway from all this?
Well, it's not so much a single takeaway, but more like an invitation.
Okay.
Helle invites us to reconsider the Epic of Gilgamesh, not just as an ancient adventure story, but as a profound reflection on the human condition itself.
And not just a passive reflection, right? He's challenging us to actively engage with these ancient words, to question our assumptions, to delve into those deeper layers of meaning.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the epic's relevance to our own lives. Even thousands of years later, we're still grappling with many of the same questions about life, death, friendship, ambition, the human relationship with nature.
You know, one of the things that really stuck with me was that idea of storytelling as a path to immortality.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful concept, but Hell doesn't shy away from the complexity of the potential costs involved. It's not as simple as just etching your name in stone.
It's a beautiful paradox, isn't it? The desire to leave a lasting legacy, to transcend mortality through stories, but also the recognition that in doing so, we might become trapped within our own narratives.
It makes you think about the stories we tell ourselves, the roles we play, the identities we construct. Are we truly in control of our own narratives, or do they end up controlling us?
That's a profound question, and it's one that the epic through Hell's lens encourages us to grapple with. It's a reminder that the stories we tell and the ways we tell them shape not only our understanding of the past, but also our vision of the future.
It's like Helly's given us this key to unlock a treasure chest of ancient wisdom, and it's up to us to decide what we do with it. We can simply admire the craftsmanship, or we can use it to navigate the complexities of our own lives.
That's a wonderful analogy, and I think Helle would agree. His book isn't meant to be the final word on the epic. It's a starting point for further exploration, for continued conversation and discovery.
Well, I know I'm going to revisit the epic with fresh eyes after this deep dive, and I encourage our listeners to do the same. If you haven't already, check out Andrew George's translation, and of course, Sophus Helle's insightful book, Gilgamesh, Story, Death, and Immortality.
Absolutely. It's an enriching journey full of unexpected twists and timeless wisdom as you delved into the world of Gilgamesh. Ask yourself, what echoes of this ancient story do you see in your own life? What does it reveal about the enduring human quest for meaning and connection?
Those are some great questions to ponder, and on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this epic adventure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those stories alive.